Okay, I'm assuming that my mic just now went live for you. You missed that whole introduction. Let's give you a quick review of that. For today's presentation, if you haven't been to the GoToWebinar interface before, you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner there's a control panel. And we'd like you to select the mic and speakers option that appears to the right of that. And if any time you have difficulty hearing the presentation, just click on the settings link that appears to the right of that. And that way you can adjust your microphone or speaker settings. If at any point I ask you to raise your hand during the presentation, you can go ahead and click on the raise hand button that appears just below that, and that'll allow me to see that you have a raised hand. Now, whether you have a mic or not, at any point you can enter a question into the chat box by typing your question at the bottom and then either hitting your enter key or clicking on the send button to send that question to me. Just so you know, I'll probably be pausing at the end of each slide to look for questions, and so if you do have a question, please know I'll probably take a look for it then. At any time during the presentation, your control panel may collapse down to a control bar. Now, don't be afraid if that happens. You can go ahead and expand it again by clicking on the orange arrow that appears at the top. That will slide that control panel back open. You can type a question if you wish to do that. Okay, before we get started, let me just see from a show of hands from all of you, how many people have a microphone today that you're using? Okay, good to know. So let's go ahead and move forward with the presentation today. People smart communication skills. Now, when we say people smart, we go through school and we study many things. We may study reading, writing, arithmetic. The one that we seldom study is probably the most important one, relationships. And our communication skills are the building blocks of those relationships. Let me ask you, you can go ahead and type this into the text box or raise a hand if you have a microphone. Where did you learn your people skills? Where did you learn how to deal with people? Okay, some people say by watching other people. I see a couple of votes for we learn from school, all right. Maybe classmates or teachers. And who else did you learn from? Okay, parents, I see that. Okay, and classmates and people that we meet at work. Yeah, it's true. We meet those people and we learn basically from amateurs. All of us have gaps within our skills, some things that we excel at, some things that we're not so great at. And the problem is that we learn from amateurs and we rarely go through school and we actually try to learn these skills. Now, when we talk about those who are people smart, do you know certain people that everybody just wants to do things for them. They're easy to work with. They're able to get compliance from other people. Whereas you have others that are so much more difficult. It's like pulling teeth to getting cooperation from anybody. Right? So we have those who excel and those who don't. Part of what we'll learn from today's session is that by the end we'll be able to describe the value of having flexible skills. Right? So it's not just certain people that we can get along and work with, but we can work with a great many people. We'll talk about how someone's communication style can have a negative impact on the interaction, make it more difficult for other people to work with them. We'll talk about the value of the first 3 minutes of that interpersonal reaction. I think you already know that, but we'll talk about specifically what goes into that. We'll talk about demonstrating positive nonverbal communication and what the negatives may be, and about how to communicate when situations are difficult, how we can be at the best even when situations are at their worst. Hey, Gladys, let's hear what you have to say. Okay, Gladys, I see your raised hand. Do you have anything to add? All right, if you find that you do have something, perhaps you had a microphone that wasn't working, just go ahead and enter in the text box and we'll answer it at any point for you. Okay. So what do we get out of all this? Well, the first thing is that we'll be able to perhaps neutralize some of our own reactions and focus more on other people. We find that many people are so focused on what's going on internally with them that they become oblivious to what's going on around them and what's going on with the people around them. We'll talk about knowing how to use what approach and with whom, right? Different strokes for different folks. And what do you get from that? Well, we're able to get more done with and through others and leave them wanting to work with us again. It's never about that one interaction that we're having with a person. It's all about the interaction that we're going to have today and tomorrow and next week and next month to cause that person to want to deal with us more and more on a regular basis. So we all know some people are more skilled and some people are less skilled when it comes to their people skills. And when we talk about people skills, we're talking about interpersonal savvy, the ability to relate with others. Some people who are less skilled, they don't relate as smoothly with a large variety of people. They get along well with some, but a very small group of people, and not so much with a large group or many other people. Maybe they find it difficult to build relationships easily with a large number of people. Maybe it's only certain people that they get along with. Maybe they're too task-oriented or work-oriented, or they're too intense, which is kind of off-putting for other people. And perhaps they may come across as being judgmental. Things happen and they place a judgment on the person or on the experience that they're having with them. And because of that, they may be seen as being arrogant. Whether they're arrogant or not, they may be seen that way. And perhaps they just have difficulty in reading others, getting that sense of what's really going on with somebody else. Yeah, I love the graphic on this slide with the one goldfish going in the opposite direction. There's nothing wrong with being an individualist. And as the wise philosophers Fleetwood Mac would say, going your own way. But there are also consequences that come from that, right? And we find that within the workplace, we're interdependent with a great number of people. We need their cooperation in order to get things done. Now, on the opposite of the less skilled, we have those who are more skilled. Right? Those more skilled people are able to relate to many different kinds of people. They're not waiting for just that relationship with one person or two people. They can build a relationship with others. We talk about they're able to build appropriate rapport, not too much nor too little. Right? They're not overly familiar nor too distant. They're able to build constructive relationships with people, meaning that they're able to get things done. There's a positive outcome from that. When things get a little bit tough, they can use diplomacy and tact. They can get their point across without making an enemy. And they're able to diffuse those high-tension situations so they can cause other people to perhaps be at their best when situations may be at their worst. Now, to be fair, when you have these more skilled and less skilled, you also have people who are overly skilled. Right? These are people who get by with their smooth interpersonal skills, perhaps at the extent that they don't have a lot of technical skills, and so they overcompensate. Maybe they spend too much time building their networks and not enough time focusing on tasks. Right? They may be perceived as not having as much substance as other people because they focus more on building relationships as opposed to achieving and getting the task done. Because of that, they may not be seen as a credible take-charge leader because they focus more on the relationships and they don't have the technical skills that we look for from that leader. And they may have some trouble facing serious conflict. They love it when things are going well, but when things get a little bit tough, they tend to disappear. So we looked at some of the symptoms. What is it that we see from those people when they're more skilled, less skilled, or perhaps when they have overused a skill? But what are some of the causes behind that? Well, they may be impatient. Maybe they're a little less sensitive to their environment, to people around them, or they form quick judgments about other people or situations. And because of this, they may be seen as being rigid or perhaps even arrogant. Right? Maybe they have difficulty handling disagreement or attacks. They feel threatened, and so they disappear. Again, we talk about when things are going well is when they're happiest and most comfortable. Or when they're criticized, they may take that personally and become defensive, rather than trying to look for the basis of that criticism. They may find it difficult to know how to respond in a variety of situations, right? Or they may not be confident in themselves, or they may be shy, which causes them to focus less on people and relationships, and they go back to where they're comfortable, which is usually doing tasks. Right? When we talk about poor listening skills, maybe they just don't hear, or they talk over others, they interrupt others, perhaps with their own. They may have poor time management skills, which means they just don't have the time to spend building relationships, investing in other people, or perhaps just too intense. Okay. So these are some of the causes. What are some of the things that we do to build some of those skills? Well, first of all, we can make the case for why we should have flexible interpersonal skills. Everybody comes in a rich variety and diversity of people that we need to deal with. Some things are easy to see. Perhaps a person may be charismatic, or they may be highly intelligent or of average intelligence. Maybe they're articulate or not so articulate, or they're warm or they're cold or they're composed. These are all things that are pretty easy to see. Some things are a little bit harder to see within people. Is this a highly motivated individual, or is it a person who's not so motivated? Is this someone who's decisive? Are they fair? Do they understand differences? In order to be able to appreciate this variety and know how to pitch our communication with them in a way it's comfortable for them to catch, we try to become more sensitive to the other people around us. People focus on different things like taking action, details, concepts, feelings with other people. So we look at what's their interaction style. Okay? And we try to mold our interaction style in a way that's comfortable for them. Right? We listen for values behind their words, and we note what they have a passion or emotion around. One key to getting anything of value done in the work world is the ability to see differences in other people. Okay, and to manage with those differences as opposed to against them. Interpersonal savvy is all about meeting each person where he or she is to get done what we need to get done. And basically, people respond favorably to what's called an ease of interaction. If they're comfortable with us, they tend to make it easier to work with us. It's easier to get things done with and through them. Right? And we do that by accepting their normal mode of doing things rather than fighting against their style, or defending our own, or letting our own style get in the way. Okay? When people are comfortable in interacting with us, things are generally more easy and more smooth to get done. When I talk about flexible interpersonal skills, often I talk about many people stand on the corner waiting for the bus of relationship to come by and pick them up, waiting for the other person to make that first step. And for my money, I'd rather be the person driving the bus. So especially within training situations, I try to be as comfortable as an old shoe to try to make it easy for that person to work with me, right? So that they relax and they open up and they become less rigid, right? And this is the case for knowing more about that person's style and working within them. When we talk about the importance of that first 3 minutes in dealing with the other person, we know how important first impressions are. Do we come across as insensitive or distant, or too busy to pay attention, too quick to get into our own agenda or to get into task? Perhaps others may feel devalued or dismissed because we're so quick talking about what we need to get done or our view on things rather than seeking their input. One of the ways that we can get past this is by focusing on being open and approachable with that person, to seek input from them before we offer our own input. Right? Often other people may feel rejected or angry or feel as if they're being diminished because their input isn't sought. Perhaps someone offers too many answers or solutions or conclusions, right? Or statements or dictates too early in the interaction rather than seeking input. So how do we get past that? Well, we listen. We look for more response from the other person. Do we know how other people look when they're feeling uncomfortable? Have you ever said something that caused the other person to feel uncomfortable and you saw a marked change in their behavior or you heard a difference in their tone? Those are the things that we focus on. And some people are just completely oblivious to that. So we work doubly hard at observing others. We select our interpersonal approach from the other person in and not from us out. It's more about pitching our message, interaction, in a way it's comfortable for them to catch. And then we ask ourselves, we initiate that rapport with them. We listen, we share, we understand, and we say, how would I treat the other person, right? As if they were a customer. So the skill isn't so much about how we talk, but it's how well we listen. We receive that information, and then we select a response to that. We allow that person to speak without interruption. As a matter of fact, after their statement, we may ask more clarifying questions to get an even deeper understanding of where they're coming from. We try to withhold our judgment about what they're saying or what we're experiencing with them. We can always judge later. That's not a problem. But in the moment, we try to suspend that judgment for a period of time and just look for what the interaction is all about at the root state. We try to restate what the other person has said to cause them to feel as if they've been heard. Right? When we paraphrase what they said and we repeat that back to them, or when we backtrack, often gives that person an opportunity to either clarify, or they may say, yes, that's exactly, they'll confirm for us, right? Or they may restate. It's interesting when we talk about nodding when another person is speaking. In some of the studies I've conducted on gender styles of communication, it's amazing when you talk about how the genders communicate. One book will say that they do it one way, and another book will have it completely reversed. So, for example, one book may say that when men nod, it means, I hear what you're saying. And when women nod, it means, I agree. And then I'll read another book, and it'll be exactly the opposite, right? So the important thing is when you nod with somebody, you offer a nonverbal communication, follow up with a verbal communication at the same time. Nod your head and say, yes, I hear what you're saying. Or nod your head and say, oh, I agree. Right? Don't leave them guessing as to what you mean by that nod. When we talk about sharing with somebody else, we talk a little bit about interpersonally skilled people share more information and they get more in return. They confide their thinking, right? And they invite responses from others, right? This is a type of disclosure that we look for appropriate disclosure. Not too deep, not too personal, not too at great length that causes the other person to feel uncomfortable, but just enough to know that we're vulnerable and that we're the same type of person that they are. We invite those responses from them. We try to remember important things about the other person. How can you tell when those things are important? Perhaps they put a little more emphasis into those statements, right? Or they speak as if they're in bold or italics, right? We try to find that common ground and we reinforce those similarities with them. Okay. I can see from a couple of your questions and statements that the audio seems to be going in and out. I apologize for that. We, depending on network issues, sometimes we'll get a little network congestion and may cause the audio to pause and then to catch up with streaming. Do know that after today that we will be offering an archive webcast of this, so you'll be able to listen to that as well. Okay? So I hope that's helpful to you. Thank you, Amy Lee, for letting me know about those things about the audio coming in and out. I appreciate that. Okay. When we look for sharing, it's important to know that we share to the extent the other person is comfortable. Look for those signs of discomfort with them or try not to disclose for too long a time. Right? And there we go for sharing. Sorry about that. I lost my track of thought. All right, we'll talk about managing your nonverbals and dealing with those. In our interpersonal communications training sessions, everybody loves talking about nonverbal communications, and they want to learn how to read other people like a book. Well, there's a great many things that can be meant by nonverbal communications. And it's really easy to misinterpret what somebody else is talking about. Like if they cross their arms, what is it supposed to mean when they cross their arms? Well, often people say that means that they're closed and they're not listening. Yet we know that highly detailed analytical type of students, like college engineering students, tend to cross their arms when they're paying rapt attention to what we're saying. So it's easy to misread what other people are saying, but we can focus on what we communicate out. So we look at understanding the critical role of those nonverbal communications, of appearing and sounding open and relaxed to the other person, to smile when it's appropriate, and to appear calm, so to have that comfort with us. Right? To keep consistent eye contact with the other person, not too much nor too little. When we talk about the appropriate level of eye contact with another person, well, you know that people who are passive in nature, they tend to look away often. Right? People who tend to be more aggressive in nature, they tend to lock on for a longer period of time. So how long should you hold eye contact with other people? Well, rather than looking for a set amount of time, we tend to mirror what the other people do. If they hold eye contact for a longer period of time, we may hold eye contact for a longer period of time. If they look away often, we may look away often as well. When we speak, we try to speak in a paced and pleasant tone. We try to avoid our own disruptive habits, like speaking too rapidly or forcefully, or using strongly worded or loaded language that may cause that person to become reactive. I call this host behavior. We try to do as much as we can with our pace and our tone and our body language to cause the other person to feel comfortable in the interaction. Well, think about it. If somebody comes to our house, don't we try to make them feel comfortable? You may take their coat from them. You may give it back when they leave. right? You try to give them a comfortable place to sit. You offer them something to drink or something to eat, right? And that's what we call host behavior. Within the interpersonal relationship, I try to adopt that host behavior, cause the other person to feel as comfortable as we can, right? We try to avoid going into too much detail. And we watch out for signaling disinterest from other people. You can tell when they're not interested, can't you? They start to look at their watch, or they start looking for somebody else to talk to, or they look past our shoulder. Right? Instead, we try to focus on keeping them involved, keeping them paced. Right? And we avoid those same symptoms ourselves. You know, the other person's going on and on. We may avoid looking at our watch or avoid looking for somebody else to talk to. Right? Fiddling with paperwork or just giving them that "I'm busy" look. So we try to avoid sending those messages of disinterest. When we talk about selective interpersonal skills, some people are able to form fantastic relationships with a small number of other people, but they're unable to form those relationships with others. Right? And so we look for those ways that we can expand our own number of people that we can interact with. Right? So some people may be interpersonally smooth with direct reports, but they're tense around senior management. What about the people that you're comfortable with? What do they tend to have in common? And is there a way that we can expand that out so that we're not hot and cold? Hot with some people, we have a great relationship, and cold with others. Is it something about their level, their style, their gender, their race, or maybe their background? Okay. So how can we create that feeling of rapport or commonality with a greater number of people? And commonality, that's the key word. That we look for those things that we have in common. We may ask them a bunch of clarifying questions or questions about the experience that they're going through. And when we find a commonality, that's when we emphasize that, not only for ourselves, but also for the other person as well, right? Often when there's those commonalities, people tend not to emphasize that, and they just go right on by, right? So we try to express that, so we give more of that feeling of rapport with that person, improves the relationship. It means our future interactions will go much better with them. For some people, they have difficulty forming those relationships, those people smart skills, because they may be internally shy. It's hard for them to reach out to others. They may generally hold back and let others take the lead. Now, perhaps they feel too vulnerable, or they're afraid how other people will react. If we're unsure of our own skills, we can branch out and we can reach out to a greater number of people. How to do that? We act as if, right? We put that hand out first to shake hands. We make more consistent eye contact. We're the first to ask a question about what the other person is experiencing. Now, if this is difficult for you, as it was for me one time, we practice in low-risk situations. We may talk to strangers outside of work, or we set a goal of meeting new people at new events, social gatherings. We try to find out what we have in common with more people. We initiate that contact. Well, you can do this at a place of worship. It could be at a PTA meeting. It could be in the neighborhood, at the supermarket. You know, whenever we encounter people that we may not see again. For me, it was when I started to train all throughout the U.S. You know, I had groups that I would work with for one day, so I had nothing to lose with the interaction. And because I was the one that was performing the training session, it was my job to adopt the role of host, to make them feel comfortable, to reach out. And I was able to expand my own ability to do that with a greater number of people from town to town. I was the master of the one-day relationship. Now, if I could just string that together for a couple of days, I'll have it made. Right? So it's the ability to work outside of our own comfort zone in low-risk situations. Another way that we can expand that is by observing what non-shy people do. We all know people who are able to build relationships at the drop of a hat, that it's easy for them to initiate. And we look at it and say, what are the types of things that those people do that cause them to be more successful? What are some of the things that you found? Let me find out from you. In your question or chat box, go ahead and jot in a couple suggestions that you have for getting past that shyness hump. Oh, I see somebody suggested joining Toastmasters. That's an excellent suggestion. If you're not aware, Toastmasters is a nonprofit group throughout the United States, well, actually throughout the world. You can find out about them at toastmasters.org. No, I'm not getting a commission off of this. You can find a meeting that occurs in, and it's for people who want to develop public speaking skills. So that is an excellent way. It's a very, I want to say comforting way to build those skills because everybody's there to support each other. I see saying hi to people and walking through halls. Yeah, starting a conversation in an elevator can be a painless way. Right? Nobody seems to talk in elevators. When you talk about saying hi to people walking through halls, at one time I used to work for a small mom and pop record company called Sony Music. And it was interesting. I had the people I worked in day out, and occasionally we would get an artist that would come into the office. And it was interesting at how well those artists would manage those relationships because they never knew who in the record company could do them some good. So one day Kenny Loggins comes walking down a hallway, gave me the biggest eye contact and a big hi. You know, it was real common for artists to do that because they were the masters of building those people skills. Any other ways you can get past that shyness hump? Okay, I see asking questions. That's another great way. Yeah, asking questions about the experience the person is going through and how they felt about it, or things that they'd like to achieve. Those are excellent ways of getting past that shyness hump. Okay, okay, moving along. Being savvy with people that we don't like. You know, it's easy to get along with people we already get along, but how do you build that relationship with a person that you choose not to interact with? But you have no choice because you have to work with them. You know, part of what we can do is what do people see in them who do like them? What do their friends see? What do their parents see? What are some of their strengths? Do we have any interests in common with them? We can reinforce those interests that we have in common with them. Okay? We can put our own judgments on hold about the person or about what it is that they're doing. Again, we can always judge later. But for now, let's look at those commonalities and let's look at what's causing them. My own personal belief is that people do things for what they feel are very rational reasons. You know, for them, what they're doing makes perfect sense. So I try to look for what is it from their perspective that causes them to do those things. Okay? I nod when I'm listening to them. I ask questions. I summarize, just as I would with people I get along with perfectly well. Right? A fly on the wall should not be able to tell whether I'm talking to a friend or a foe. I try to talk a little bit less and maybe ask more questions. I don't apologize for my own positions, nor do I criticize theirs. Right? If the person is particularly contentious, I try to respond neutrally by restating the problem that we're both working on. So I focus on the problem, right, not on the person. And that leads us right into the tense interactions that we may have with other people. When things get a little bit tense, how can I be at my best even when others might be at their worst? Right? What if I'm feeling attacked or if the person just doesn't like me very much? Right? I practice personal Aikido, which is the art of absorbing the energy of the other person and using it to manage the relationship. I let the other person vent their frustrations or blow off their steam, right? Without reacting to them directly. I try to let them empty their bag. It's a wonderful gift that you can offer to somebody else. Is just listen attentively to them while they're communicating or venting. Right? If this sounds like they're done, I try to invite even more. I ask some more questions to try to find out what's at the base. Right? I listen, I nod, I ask clarifying questions. Do you hear a common theme here? It's all about listening, nodding, asking questions. I may ask some open-ended questions like, why is this particularly bothersome to you? You know, what can I do to help? Boy, that's a magic phrase. What can I do to help? You know, people often don't care how much I know until they know how much I care. And asking how I can help often is very disarming for that person that may be attacking or venting. Right? I try to restate their position periodically to show that I understand. Above all, I try to avoid reacting, and I try to avoid judging. And I try to keep them talking until they've completely emptied their bag. And I look for what's behind. I separate the person from the problem. When somebody attacks me, I often rephrase that as an attack on a problem or a situation that's happening. Okay? If I allow them to empty their bag, and I always allow more space beyond that, sometimes I'll just say nothing. People often respond by saying more and coming off their position just a little bit. And many times, if I allow them to vent completely, the conflict actually starts to shrink and the problem becomes smaller, right? And their emotion becomes smaller. And they're more willing to exhaust themselves and then start to work on the situation itself. Okay? So these are some ways that we can work with those tense interactions. You know, at this point, we can actually talk a little bit about when somebody's in an attacking mood or attacking form. What's behind that? And when somebody's acting in an angry fashion, my own personal belief is that anger is the secondary emotion. Usually something else has come before that. It's either usually hurt, frustration, or fear. The person either feels hurt because something's happened, or they feel frustrated because something's happened, or they feel fearful or threatened in some way. And then they become angry to deal with one of those three primary emotions. If I look for the root emotion, I'll often feel less attacked in the process. Right? Oh, that person is just feeling frustrated. I can certainly understand that. Now I don't feel like I'm being the focal point. They're frustrated about a situation. Or that person just feels hurt. I can certainly understand that. Now I don't feel like the focal point of an anger. I feel like, oh, they're just feeling hurt. It's about their feeling, right? Or they're feeling threatened about something. I can certainly understand that. Now I don't feel as if I'm the target because of their anger. Oh, they're just feeling threatened. That's something's happening inside of them. I can certainly understand that. When I don't feel like I'm the target of their emotion, it allows me to feel less threatened and defensive and more willing to reach out and to help them with that feeling that they're going through at that point. Right? These are some of the ways that we can be at their best, even when the situation may be at its worst. Okay. So putting it all together, for our entire conversation for this little lunch and learn that we've gone through, we try to use flexible interpersonal skills so we can flex our behaviors to be most helpful or most beneficial in dealing with a greater variety of people, instead of just relying on those one or two that we can interact with. We try to warm up that interaction with that person, and we do that by being as comfortable as an old shoe, speaking softly, slowly, relaxed with that person, not too intense with them, right? We try to manage that first impression with them, meaning that we may reach out to shake hands first. We may ask questions of them, right? We initiate the contact with that person to make them feel comfortable. We listen without interrupting that person. We may backtrack some of what they say, or we may ask clarifying questions of them, right? Our next session is going to be all about listening skills, so we'll talk about that in even greater detail. We share appropriately. We disclose a little bit of our thoughts. We let them see a little bit about our way of thinking, right? But not to the extent that we make them feel uncomfortable, where we're sharing too much or we're sharing at too great a length that they wonder, when am I ever going to stop? But we share appropriately, and we look for responses from them to show that they're comfortable with that. We try to manage our nonverbals. We try not to signal disinterest to that person. We may avoid crossing our arms because we don't know how they're going to read that. So we use open body posture, right? We try to make appropriate eye contact with them. We nod as appropriate, and we follow that with verbal reinforcement for them. We try not to be selective with our personal skills, where we relate only to certain people and not to others. We try to open up and relate with more people, right? Rather than waiting for the bus or relationship to come by and pick us up, we're the ones driving the bus. Okay. If we experience feelings of shyness, we try to act out anyway, right? Reach out and shake that hand, initiate the conversation, ask a question about what the person's going through, right? Seek to bring them out, to cause them to feel valued. We practice being savvy with people that we don't like. You know, when you go to the gym, it's important that we have to work out with a weight to become stronger, to go past that discomfort. I'm not going to say that difficult people and situations are dumbbells in our life, but they're the weight that we have to lift, right? Those people that we don't get along with, they actually make us stronger, so they're the ones where we need to practice our skill the most. And then we practice that interpersonal aikido during our tense interactions. We pull the person out, we ask questions, we cause them to feel valued, and we redirect that energy to focus on the situation, about using that as an opportunity to improve the relationship in the future, right? Rather than a splinter that goes underneath the skin during this interaction. Okay. Now, it isn't just about this one little lunch and learn. Within 1 hour, you can't learn everything there is to be about people smart and building those interpersonal skills. Right? We offer ongoing support by going to our website at classifiedtraining.lausd.net. Okay? We have just-in-time training support that's offered for that by topic. Okay, how do we do that? Click on the employee resources and click on just-in-time training support. And that'll take you to our just-in-time training support page where you'll see all the topics that we're offering. And we're always offering new topics. And once you know it, one of the topics is communication skills. If you click on that link, you'll be able to see a page that we've created where we're adding more and more content on a daily basis. For example, frequently asked questions, so talk about communicating in group setting, or if I'm communicating about a sensitive or controversial topic, how do I do that? We have documents that are available. For example, white papers on breaking through barriers to effective listening. We talk about tap dancing through minefields, avoiding unintended put-down messages, right? As well as links to outside contact on avoiding negativity and communication tips and efficient email management. Okay? So a lot of great tips that happen beyond that. And if you don't want to look up the site, we can actually, I'll put it here for you. Here's a link that you can click on. Let's see, get that in the chat box for you. That will open up that page for you. Okay. In addition, if you'd like a copy of the slides from today, I'll add that into the chat box for you as well, so you can click on that and have a copy of the slides to take away with you. Okay. So we have ongoing support for you. As I mentioned, this session will be archived within the Learning Zone, so in the future you'll be able to go back to the Learning Zone and you'll be able to find the same title and say website archive to view the recording of that. Yeah. In addition, while you're in the Learning Zone, we appreciate if you fill out an evaluation for this session. Go to your My History tab and you'll be able to fill out a course evaluation for this session. Your comments, the good, the bad, and just plain ugly, really help us to improve our future sessions. So I appreciate that if you would. And be sure to sign up for next week's session. We've got 2 more in this series. Next Thursday from 12 o'clock to 1, we'll talk about communicating through effective listening. And then the week after that, on the 27th, we'll talk about 10 essentials for presentations. So you'll find that within our Workforce Management Classified Training section. Okay. Hey, I'd like to thank you for your participation today. You know, many people don't invest in their own self-improvement. They spend more time and more money on their outsides than they will on their insides. They'll spend more time and money on a haircut, clothes, makeup, and so on than they will on their own self-development. For those of you that attended today, you have my admiration because you've taken time out of your day, most likely your lunchtime, to try to sharpen your interpersonal skills so it becomes that much easier to deal with people in the future. And no matter where we go, we have reading, writing, arithmetic, but the most important is relationships. And your communication skills are the building blocks for those relationships. I'd like to thank you for playing along. If you have other questions, I'll stay as long as you have questions. I have no life, you're it. But for the rest of you, I'd like to thank you for participating. I wish you the best. You're welcome, Lee.